And welcome back once again to How to Survive 2025. I'm Brian Keene.
I'm Dacia M. Arnold.
I'm Jim Cobb.
And guys, as we're recording this, it is October 8th, Tuesday, October 8th. And Hurricane Milton, one of the strongest hurricanes to ever churn out of the Gulf of Mexico, is about to hit, the way it looks currently, Tampa just head on, possibly as a Category 5. And it seems like we just went through this, did we not? With like 2 weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
Still going through it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. They're just beginning in that area to recover. It's going to take a long time to get things back sorted out.
Yeah, I heard an interesting comment today. Somebody said in regards to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and first responders, that in a situation like this, like Asheville, North Carolina, and surrounding Appalachian areas that were hit by Hurricane Helene, that those groups are not actually first responders, they're second responders. The first responders are the people that are there at ground zero when the disaster hits. Yep. And hopefully some of those people have been listening to our free podcast.
Well, and the thing is, like, we talked about bug out bags. Okay, we talked about that, I think it was the last episode.
Right.
One of the names for the bug out bag is a 72-hour kit. The reason it's a 72-hour kit is because agencies like FEMA estimate that the soonest they will have boots on the ground and be able to start rendering aid is 72 hours after the disaster hits. It's ridiculous to assume that, the wind and rain dies down and FEMA trucks are going to be right there. The logistics of it just aren't going to work like that. You have to be able to work on your own. You have to be able to satisfy your own basic needs for a bare minimum of 72 hours, probably longer, before any type of aid is going to be there.
Right.
It is disheartening to see in this day and age, just towns, communities completely devastated.
Yep.
And then turn around and see the other side of it, and like, who's the Democrats or the Republicans are responsible, or like chemtrails, and this is a work of the government. Like, seriously, it's silly.
One of the things that I've heard from multiple people who are in those affected areas, and I was glad to hear this, is the people who are there, they're not asking who you support politically. They're not asking who you're going to vote for. They're not asking what religion you are. They're not asking any of that. They're asking, do you need food? Do you need water? Do you need diapers? Do you need help? And they're helping. And that's one of the things that, we're all old enough to remember 9/11. Okay. And in the days after 9/11, how so many people came together, to console one another, to try to help one another get through it. And I'm not going to say it was across the board, because there was also some pretty nasty shit that happened in the aftermath of 9/11. But generally speaking, Americans came together to help one another. And that's what we're seeing now in North Carolina and these other areas. And I would assume we're going to see the same thing in a few more days once Milton has made his appearance.
Well, the other thing to remember, as these things occur and in the aftermath, as the second responders like FEMA and National Guard and others reach those areas, yes, tempers and nerves are going to be frayed. Maybe you're one of those survivors, and maybe you're wet and you're tired and you're hungry and your house got washed away, and God forbid your loved ones or your animals got washed away with it. Salud.
Sorry.
These people that are on the ground and coming in to help, they are not part of the bureaucracy. I'm personally a big believer in it doesn't matter who's in office. Bureaucracy is going to bureaucracy. But the second responders coming in to help you, they're not the ones making the decisions in Washington. They're not
Right.
the ones passing the bills or the laws. They're there just to do their jobs. And
Mhm.
yeah, they
Yep.
don't, by and large, they don't care who you voted for. They don't
Nope.
care who you love. They don't care who you worship. They're just there to help.
Mhm.
People helping
Yep.
people, and at the end of the day, that's all we are, and that's all we can do. I know a lot of people are very frustrated with the processes, and
Oh
they
yeah.
feel like government doesn't know what they're doing, and they're hindering aid. But in all honesty, like as a combat medic, we're always taught situation safety, scene safety. If it's not safe for you to go in and render aid, like you're just going to be another casualty. You're going to add to
Right.
the problem.
Yep.
You're not going to add to the solution. You're not going to be a hero. You're just be that dumbass who got
Mhm.
themselves hurt like unnecessarily.
One of the most basic tenets of any type of emergency care is what?
Scene safety.
Protect yourself first.
Hmm.
You need to put on gloves. You need to wear a mask. You need to do these things before you render aid. Otherwise, like you said, you're just going to be another casualty.
That's right. Another thing is like they are flooded with donations, and thank you to everyone who has given what they could
Mm-hmm.
in this disaster, but also understand that there are more people giving than there are people to receive, sort, catalog, and distribute.
Right.
So it's not that they're hoarding. There's just not enough people. There's not enough hours in the day. People have
Mm-hmm.
to sleep. But
I
what about
remember
people
hearing
like,
about the aftermath of Katrina,
mhm,
trailers of stuffed animals that were just left because, number one, they weren't truly physically needed to live, and number two, they had nowhere to go with them.
mhm.
And you know,
Yeah.
it's a horrible situation. It
Yeah.
really is all around. And
So
I think they're doing the best they can with what they have.
as Milton approaches,
Mhm.
I thought maybe it might be useful for the three of us to look at it step by step, put ourselves in the shoes of somebody in Tampa and recap some of what we've covered on the first 8 episodes of the show. Because if you go back over those 8 episodes, every one of them can be put into practice right now.
Mhm.
Hurricane Milton is exactly the kind of thing we've been talking about for 8 episodes.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
The first thing we come down to is when to evacuate.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been yesterday.
Yeah, at the latest.
Yeah. I have a dear friend. He's a fellow author, Edward Lee, who unfortunately has to get dialysis every other day for the rest of his life. So I heard from him. He's near Fort Myers, and his plan was to evacuate today as soon as dialysis was done. He is not one to drive all the way up to Georgia or North Carolina or elsewhere. He goes to the nearest evacuation center.
Wow.
He's
Okay.
old hat at this.
Mm-hmm.
He keeps his bug out bag. He keeps gasoline because as we've seen on news coverage, gas stations are running out of fuel because over 1 million people are evacuating.
Mhm.
Yep.
We see footage of clogged highways,
Mhm.
even though they've opened the breakdown lanes and done away with tolls because everybody's using the same route.
Wow. That's
I think Jim had mentioned in episode 6 about finding alternate routes, exploring them before a
wow.
crisis like this hits.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. You have to know where you're going and you have to know how you're going to get there, particularly in situations like this where the interstates are nothing but very, very slowly moving parking lots.
Mhm.
I'm hearing reports of what would be normally a 2-hour ride is taking 8 hours or more.
Mm.
And that's only if you have enough gas to get there.
Mm.
Because, like we said, gas stations are running out of fuel. People are freaking out, and justifiably so. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one thing to be stranded at home when a hurricane hits. It's another thing to be in your car on the freeway when a
Mhm.
hurricane hits. Where do you go? What do you do? You know, there comes a time where you just gonna have to say a prayer and hope for the best.
Man.
You know, um, one of the things that I wanted to mention right off as we're getting into this, and this can be a homework assignment. Um, I don't think I've mentioned this before. If I have, I apologize. One of the things I'd like for everybody to do, all of our listeners, I want you to make a list of all of your family members who live in your home. And I want you to, under their name, I want you to write down a bunch of things that you love about every one of them. And I want you to fold that paper up and I want you to put it somewhere safe. If a disaster hits and you're 3 days into a grid down scenario, I want you to find that list and read it to remind yourself why you don't really hate these people.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
That's a great idea, actually.
It's true. I mean, we're in the aftermath of any kind of a serious event. We're all going to be stressed.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to have, very quick tempers. We're going to be very short with one another, not because we're angry with them, but we're just angry. We're upset. We're stressed out. And something like that can be just enough to give you a breather and say, okay, say it with me. It's going to be okay.
My homework for everyone who's not in Florida running is to get your tetanus shot. Goodness gracious. Yeah. It's good for 10 years. Just do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I have a question for you, Dacia.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try not to get us off in the weeds, but you have medical training. You aren't a doctor,
no.
But you have medical training. Now, we talked on the air before. I think it was in episode 2 or 3 or 4 about my burn accident.
Mm-hmm.
I know I got a tetanus shot then.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm 57 years old. I can rarely remember my full name, let alone what year I got that tetanus shot. So every 6 months when I go to the doctor, for my 6-month checkup, how long has it been since your last tetanus shot? And I say, I don't know, 5 years, maybe 6 years. What happens if you get one before that 10-year window? Do you get like double tetanus protection? Does it?
No.
Do you grow gills?
No, if you genuinely cannot remember, 9 times out of 10, your doctor can. Your doctor can look up your inoculations, your immunizations. And so even the last one is if you don't move a lot and you have the same doctor, you're in the same hospital system. A lot of hospital systems across the United States use a system called Epic. And Epic has Care Everywhere. Care Everywhere allows doctors who are also on Epic to look into your file from other physicians, even if they're out of state, if they use the same system. Here in Pennsylvania, though, UPMC does not share, and it could be to the detriment of some people. If you're a lady and you have had a child in the last 10 years, you have had your tetanus shot because it is in your Tdap vaccination while you're pregnant. I found this out after stabbing myself with the knife, and I'm glad I'm only telling Jim this today. After I stabbed myself with someone else's knife, so it wasn't my knife, went to the doctor, and they asked, and I was like, I could not remember. But luckily they had that system, and she was like, yeah, if your kid is so-and-so years old, you're good to go.
Huh.
So if you're a dude who's 50 years old.
They give you one automatically when you're stabbed as well?
Typically they do. If you can't verify, if you're in emergency room or urgent care and you can't verify the last time you had a tetanus shot, they're just going to give you one.
Okay, so I've had one at least twice in the last 20 years. Then a stab wound and a burn. So
I mean, on average, that's the right ratio.
Yeah, and Jim, it wasn't any knife that you sent me, and it wasn't me wielding the knife when I got stabbed. So
if it was one that I sent you, you would have never felt it. That's how
that is true. So we need to get back on topic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we got this gigantic, crazy hurricane about to hit Florida. How often do these things come straight up from the Gulf and don't even go back out to the Atlantic? Like that happens, right?
Yeah, but not often.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm
So
not
we're
a
pretty
meteor.
like confident this thing's gonna stay on
Yeah.
its path.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not a meteorologist, but I like to pretend I'm one on Twitter. No, I actually, it's funny you asked this because I was reading an article this morning about Tampa. Tampa rarely gets a direct hit from hurricanes,
Oh man.
and
Okay.
there's all kinds of theories, everything from scientific and meteorologically based science to things like they think the burial mounds of the original indigenous people keep the hurricanes away. Um, it it is rare that Tampa ever gets a direct hit.
Wow.
They say in this case it will be extremely rare if Tampa doesn't get a direct
Okay.
hit. The last true direct hit was over 100 years ago, and nobody living in Tampa now was there when that happened. So, make of that what you will.
Okay. Fair
So
enough.
yeah, it's rare.
Mhm.
When you add to that the fact that Hurricane Helene just came through 2 weeks ago and tore up most of that state, and now here's another one that's going to cross the entire state.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's evacuate, 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 and have your bug out bag ready.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, at this point, evacuation might be fruitless. It might be
Yes,
pointless because you're literally not going anywhere on the roads unless you've really planned ahead and you know a lot of those little
Yeah.
twisty, turny back roads, you're not going anywhere, And the unfortunate thing about Florida hurricanes is, as I've been told, a lot of the native Floridians, they're not going to evacuate because 9 times out of 10, it turns out to not be anything worth evacuating for. Either the hurricane
Mhm.
turns or it decreases in size and power to the point where it's not as big a deal. Add to that, there are a lot of, and I just found this out today, there are a lot of Floridians who live in the central part of the state who don't evacuate anyway because they're in their mind they're saving that space on the roads for the people who live on the coast.
Mhm.
They're letting the coastal people evacuate because they figure the central part of the state is going to be safer. Let the people who need that space take it.
And a lot of people on the coastline are just moving inland. They're not
Yeah.
leaving. They're not just evacuating the entire state. They're moving inland to, thank
Mhm.
goodness, like national treasure Ed Lee is is headed to a bunker essentially, but like a hurricane
Mhm.
center. I think like now I know we already had the evacuation show, but like now thinking about it, if it were me and I had to get it, I would need a list. I need
Mhm.
today to make a list of everything that I need because I'm gonna forget something. I
Right.
100% know. I'm gonna forget
Yep.
birth certificates. I'm gonna forget dog food. I'm gonna forget
Mhm.
my son's medication. Like
Yep.
100%.
Now, here's one approach that I've talked about in classes before that might be suitable for you or, other people. Make a list of everything that you want to make sure you grab if you have 10 minutes to evacuate.
Yeah. Mhm.
Then make another list for if you have a half hour.
Yeah.
Make another list if you have an hour. Make another list if you have all day. Depending on where you are. I mean, for example, if you live in wildfire country, odds are it's not a 5-minute decision to evacuate. You've got a little bit of time to prepare and to pack things away. Keep that list handy so that if you decide, okay, we need to beat feet, you know what to grab, you know where to find it. You could go so far if you're really OCD about this. Make a list for each room of your home
Yeah.
and keep the list taped to the back of the door. And as you could send family members.
Yes.
Go into the den and grab everything on that list.
But also check behind them and make sure that they did it.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
tell my mom. But seriously, like if
Mhm.
I think people underestimate what I can do in 10 minutes. Okay, I could probably do the half a day list in 10 minutes
Sure.
if I needed
Sure.
to, because I'm the mom and I put everything away and I know where it all is.
Exactly.
My husband
Yep.
can't find cheese in the refrigerator.
So
I'm
let's,
joking. He is sharp in emergencies, but
so
it's
let's say you are in Florida right now and Milton is
ugh.
bearing down on you and it's too late to evacuate.
Mhm.
I did what Jim said. I made a list of some hurricane specific things that I don't think we've talked about on
Oh,
the
Okay.
show. See, I did my homework so that our listeners wouldn't have to. That's because I love you, listeners, unlike Daisha and Jim, who just give you homework every week.
teach you nothing.
Mhm.
So the hurricane's bearing down, but it hasn't started raining yet. Maybe the wind's picking up a little bit. One thing to think of: go outside and, if you have time, prune any dead or dying limbs off nearby trees.
Yeah, wow.
Yep.
Lower any antennas or
Mhm.
satellite dishes, things like that you may have out in the yard or on the roof. Of course, board up your windows, your shutters, any exposed glass. You don't want that turning into flying shrapnel. Um, Here's one that seems like common sense, but I bet a lot of people, if they're panicked, might forget. Bring all pets indoors.
Oh,
Yeah,
because some have pets that live outside too.
Yep.
yeah.
And related to that, and this is something I meant to mention during the bug out episode, and I forgot. If you're evacuating, do not leave your pets tied
Oh,
up outside.
oh.
Don't
I
do
think
it.
that's a pet at
No,
that
no,
point. You don't have a pet. And you
no.
don't.
A friend of mine did some of the recovery work after Katrina, and it was even worse than you can imagine on that front. It
Jesus.
was really bad.
Or people
Don't
that
do
can't get home to get
Yep.
their pup off the line.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And,
anyway,
and some
back
of
to
the
your
things on the list we have covered. Filling your bathtub and your sinks with water.
Mhm.
We talked about the possibility of drinking toilet water. And what's in your tank. I believe we mentioned before turning off your gas valves and your electricity before the storm hits.
Mhm.
Batteries for your flashlights, your radio. We talked about all that. Um, Setting the refrigerator on maximum cold, I think we talked about. Now, here's one that I didn't occur to me, and I'm not sure why, Jim. I'm hoping you can explain to me. I found this online. If you have a swimming pool, fill swimming pools a foot below their edge. Add additional chlorine. And the additional chlorine I get, but what does filling it a foot below its edge do?
The only thing I can think of is to account for rainfall.
Oh, so you're not
So it
flooding
doesn't
yourself.
overflow. But I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense to me. I don't know why
Okay.
otherwise.
I don't know, but there are areas in Georgia that are looking at 2 to 4
Yeah.
feet of rain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe do a little more. And those
I don't know.
I
instances,
mean,
so you don't flood yourself.
when we did the water episode,
Yeah.
one of the things I pointed out was nobody has ever come out the other end of a disaster upset that they had too much clean water available.
Mhm.
Okay. It's better to have too much than not enough. Now, in a flood situation, that's too much water, but it's not too much clean water. You're dealing with nasty water. And one of the things with a swimming pool, if flood water gets into that swimming pool, you got to consider the whole thing contaminated.
Mhm.
Okay, you can't just dip a cup and drink, otherwise it's not going to end well for you. You're not going to have a fun time.
All right. So what else? Obviously, get to high ground if you can, but if you live in a one-story house, I guess what? A central room, a small central room.
Small central room if possible. Like you said, board up the windows. It in some cases you might deploy sandbags outside your doors, to help prevent that water from seeping in. There is no perfect solution to dealing with massive flooding. There just isn't. It is one of the worst possible natural disasters to have to encounter because it's just nasty from start to finish. Um, Prior to doing that kind of thing, make sure that you get as much cash available as
Oh,
possible
yes.
and keep it somewhere safe. One of the things that we've learned, particularly in the last couple of weeks after Helene hit, it's not gold, it's not silver, it's not ammo, it's not barter goods, it's cash that will get you what you need, assuming you find somebody selling it, whether it's fuel, food, bottled water, whatever. In the prepper world, there is often this pushback about money where, well, cash is going to be worthless in a collapse, so I don't bother keeping it. I keep gold and silver and blah blah blah. Okay, that's great, but if you and I both go to Walmart and we're trying to buy cases of bottled water and I've got cash and you have gold coins, who's walking away with the water? Okay, right now nobody is taking precious metals in in North Carolina or any of these affected states. They're taking cash. Get as much cash as you can possibly get together and put it somewhere safe. Um, Related to that, kind of, there, and this crops up often in the wake of hurricanes. There's this thought process of taking important documents and photo albums and mementos and things like that and putting them in your dishwasher, because the dishwasher, because it doesn't leak when it works, we
Mm-hmm.
figure it's waterproof and it'll protect the contents. That's not the case. Number one, in a flood, your drains will overflow.
Mm-hmm.
Your dishwasher has a drain.
Yeah.
It's going to come up inside there. Number two, the dishwasher will prevent water from coming out from a spray that's going around in there. Your dishwasher, when it works, it doesn't fill up with water. That's not how the appliance works. And I think some people think that's what happens. It The seal around that door isn't going to prevent flood water from getting in. Now, if you want to take your documents and your photos and put them inside plastic bags and seal
Mm-hmm.
them up and then put them in there, I mean, I guess it might be a small secondary level of protection, but you're not just tossing photo albums in there, shut the door, and it's going to be great
Yeah.
after 4 feet of water has come through your house. Doesn't work like that. But it's one of these things that people share over and over and over on social media because on the surface, with about 4 seconds of thought, it makes sense. But then once you apply a little bit of logic and common sense, it falls apart. People don't get to that point. They just share. Oh, I feel good now.
Yeah. Another risk aside from flooding with hurricanes and stuff like that, and we saw this a lot in Colorado and anywhere like where they have fire season, is
Mhm.
landslides.
Yep.
So like any kind of excess of moisture, like on a hilltop or anything, can just that topsoil can slough off in massive amounts. Um,
Hmm.
it's torn apart roads. It has taken out houses. Um,
Sure.
and it's not just in those fire scars. We're also seeing it in Asheville too.
Hmm.
I think I'm
Yeah.
looking up at this hill that's like a side of my house that's like twice the height of my house, and I'm like, ugh, do I really want to stay here if it rains?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned roads. Even if it's not hitting your house,
Hmm.
it's still going to affect your ability to move around.
Yes, and people
And
to get to you as well.
exactly, exactly. And that's one of the reasons why, having some means of communication is
Mhm.
important so that you can let people know what if you're okay or not, and you can monitor the situation and find out ahead of time what roads are accessible, what roads are not accessible. If you're dealing with a very limited fuel supply for your vehicle, you don't want to be driving around for hours trying to find the roads that are decent. Let
Mhm.
somebody else do the experimenting and then just figure it out from there.
I know they're in some remote places they have just central command locations
Yep.
in the community. These are people
Hmm.
that live there in the
Hmm.
community, have set up central locations with no power, no communication, no like line of supplies coming through.
Yep.
People have just come together, brought what they had, drop it off at the fire station. They'll write their name, where they're at, who they're with. And that way people who can make it there, and a lot of it's on bike, on foot,
Yep.
you know,
Mhm.
backpacking supplies to these remote locations, but they stop at the fire station and they take notes of all the names there so they can take it back and communicate to their family and loved ones that, hey, they are okay, they're
Yep.
home, or they're here. They don't have power or electricity or anything like that, but they're safe and taken care of.
Mhm.
And then from there, those people who are in the community will then go out to place, like they have maps, they live there,
Yeah.
they know where the houses are, and they can
Mhm.
go and see who is where and who needs help and centralize that help.
Yeah.
They even have medical set up in these remote places and
Nice.
tetanus shots. But like people come together. They're not in this alone.
Right. Right. Yep. Um, there's something I was going to bring up. Now I can't remember what it was. Oh, as you're gathering supplies ahead of the storm. Okay, we talked about cash.
Mhm.
Make sure if you have young children in the mix, babies, make sure you have diapers.
Mm.
If you have women in the mix, make sure you have feminine hygiene products. Make sure you have everything you could possibly need for at least 2 weeks, preferably longer, but at least 2 weeks. Now, if you go back through our other episodes, we've talked about having that as a bare minimum, just as a matter of course.
Mhm.
Just that's the routine in your home, is to have at least 2 weeks of all these different things. If you're not there yet and the storm is a coming, that's a good time to stock up and get what, the problem is you're fighting the crowds, you're fighting everybody else who's out there trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why we talk about having a bare minimum of a supply level in your home, so that it isn't crisis mode every time a storm hits. Okay. But make sure you take a real good look at what you do have and fill those gaps as soon as possible before the crowds start lining up and wiping the shelves clean.
Okay, I am going to take some ladies to school real quick. Brian, Jim, close your ears. I don't care. Okay. So,
I've been
ladies.
married for
What?
30 years. Trust me.
Well, Brian's got his wife's t-shirt on, which is like 10 out of 10. She's
I do
my hero too.
for those listening on Spotify and Apple rather than watching us on YouTube. We should clarify. I'm not wearing one of my wife's t-shirts.
It would have been
I'm
better
wearing
if you
my
were.
t-shirt that has one of my wife's book covers on it.
That's hilarious.
Although, I do occasionally wear her t-shirts if all of mine are dirty. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so we did bring up feminine hygiene products, and if you're gonna run out. I mean, if it's 1 month, if it's just you didn't get to the store, you're gonna run out. What do you do? So one of the biggest things, and I did it because I wanted to get rid of trash, and old houses in Pennsylvania have horrible plumbing. So I kind of wanted to get away from needing to purchase disposable feminine hygiene products. So there are alternatives out there. So I kept thinking, if zombie apocalypse were to happen, if I were in Walking Dead, like how are they dealing with their periods here? No one has stains on. They all have stains on their pants, but not from their period. But anyway, I digress. There's a thing called they're silicone cups. They're called
Mhm.
Diva cups. If you don't have to be a diva to have one, but they're a medical grade silicone that you boil just like you would boil baby's bottles to sterilize them. And you can use those cups to insert to go around your cervix and collect blood so that you're not leaking everywhere. For those ladies who do have a heavy flow and need a backup, they make period panties that are no different, no thicker than just regular underwear that you would have. And all you really need is maybe like 3 to 5 pairs of period underwear and a Diva cup, a means to wash it with soap, antibacterial soap, and boil it, and you're good to go. You're good to go. You don't have to worry about packaging a whole bunch of boxes of your tampons. Yes, sir, Jim.
I have one question.
Yes.
How does the Diva Cup work on gunshot wounds?
Oh, touche.
We got to have the doc back on and ask him.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. But really, I was at the doctor's office going through like a procedure and was asked, "Do you have any removable item?" And I'm like, "Well, this thing." And she's like, "Well, are you going to take it out?" I'm like, "No, ma'am, I am not," because she didn't know what it was.
Okay.
And so then I explained. She's like, "Yeah, don't take that.
Don't take that out.
Please don't." But the more people who have education that there are alternatives that are healthy, that are good for the environment, that are going to not pile up trash in your house when there's no one taking out the trash or picking it up, that there's an alternative. Now, baby's diapers, you go cloth diapers all day long, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and the only downside to a cloth diaper in a disaster scenario is trying to clean them. You know, that's why one of the suggestions I have is, even if you are a die-hard cloth diaper all day, every day,
back up.
You might want to invest in some disposables to get you through. You
And
know, because you don't want to use your water supply to wash that when you could be using it for other things.
Like drinking it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that cloth diapers don't account for that minimum water need for every person either. Right. So if you just you're like, oh, infant, well, he only drinks so many ounces a day, I'm good. But if you're washing, a 5-gallon bucket of dirty diapers in a day every 2 days, then that's going to burn through your water pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, try not to shit your own pants. So don't drink water that's not like purified or boiled or filtered. Right. Filter it and boil it. You can use your Brita filter. You have to boil your water.
Yeah. Yeah. What do we call it? Farts with lumps?
Lumps.
We want to avoid that.
All right, guys. Anything else you can think of in this recap of our first 8 episodes and how they all tie together with current events, what's happening right now?
Prescription meds. If you are somebody or you have somebody in your family who needs certain medications, make sure you have an adequate supply to get you through. Running to Walgreens in 4 feet of flood water isn't going to happen. You need to have that supply on hand and ready to go. Talk to your doctor. I mean, if you live in Florida or one of these other affected areas that routinely get hurricanes, your doctor's probably going to understand why you want to have extra, and they'll work with you as best they can to make sure that you have that emergency supply.
Mindset, just hang in there.
Hang
in there.
What's it going to be, Dacia?
It's going to be okay.
It is going to be okay.
Guys, you're going to live through this.
I want you to hold that thought, because I'm going to want you to repeat it again after I tell listeners about next week's episode. As I said, we've sort of recapped our first 8 episodes to illustrate to you how the information all ties together in a practical way. We weren't talking about, black helicopters from the New World Order. It wasn't George Soros's Illuminati lizard people, army. It wasn't an alien invasion or zombies. It was practical advice for real things that can really happen. Unfortunately, in the aftermath of this storm, something that will also probably happen, that we'll probably see on our TV screens, is looting. Florida is a Second Amendment state. A lot of gun owners are going to be evacuated. We will probably see some looting. We have an election coming up in 4 weeks. We will probably see some protests.
I hope they're just protests.
I hope they're just protests too.
Yeah.
they could turn violent. And that's what we're going to be talking about next week. We're going to talk about violence. We're going to talk about what to do if you're on a date at the movie theater or a concert venue and a mass shooting breaks out. We're going to talk about what to do if you're confronted in an alley by one of those 1970s street gangs that you see in the old movies. We're going to talk about rioting and looting and what to do when confronted with violence. We hope that you'll tune in for that. We understand that, the subject matter may be even more upsetting than the things we normally talk about, but it's important information for you to have. And while we're talking about it, I want you to remember what Dacia said. And what is that, Dacia?
It's going to be okay.
That's right. All right. We will see you next week, folks.